as we say, the rest is history. I think he still likes us, I think. And we have been blessed to be friends for over 30 years. Ray was here in Maryland 30 years ago at our national specialty in Clinton, Maryland. Woo! And he got to meet Natalka. But anyway, we're just blessed that he could be with us. And sorry he couldn't be with us in person, but he's here and we wish him all a speedy recovery.
Hello. I'm very sorry I'm not there with you tonight. I wanted to be, and just last minute they said, no, you can't do it. If I had been there, then I could have corrected Marilyn at the very beginning, because much of what she told you is not exactly true. Back in the end of the 60s and into the 70s, wildlife law, I think it was in 72 that Richard Nixon signed a bill. It was a budget bill, and on the bill was a rider that said that there would be no more lethal methods of predator control on government land. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
All right. So anyway, and that was followed by a couple of other national amendments which kind of left the farmers high and dry out there, because they had always been protecting their flocks with lethal methods of control. There were poisons, there were traps, there were all kinds of explosive devices and so forth for killing predators. And all of a sudden, those just got taken away from them. And the American farmers felt like they'd had the rug pulled out from under them. So I got hired to look at methods of non-lethal predator control. And one of the things that was suggested to me was livestock guarding dogs. And so, you know, as an old sled dog racer, my life had been full of dogs getting loose and killing the neighbor's sheep. So my very best dogs had killed some of the very best sheep in the neighborhood. And thus, I thought that I thought it was a silly idea to get dogs to guard sheep. But it was my job, and that's what I tried to do. Tried to investigate them. And the way I investigated them was to go to the old world and to look at working dogs. And I had this rule. Never mind breed, never mind what people say, is that you have to go and you have to see the dog in the field and see it working. And so I did. I explored Mediterranean Europe, Italy, and Yugoslavia, and Portugal, Spain, all these countries. I went out there. It was a dog guy's ideal life. And the funny thing about it was that in those years, when you rented a car in Europe to go around and see these things, they wouldn't allow the car to go to Turkey. I had one guy tell me, he said, "We've never got a car back from Turkey." So he wasn't going to let the car go to Turkey. So I didn't go. And besides, I had my dogs and I was a happy man. Well, Skip and Marilyn showed up on my doorstep one time. And to make a long story short, they basically said that they wanted Anatolian Shepherds to be part of the testing program, part of the project. And I dragged my feet a little bit because, one, I didn't know what an Anatolian Shepherd was, and two, you know, why start something else or whatever. But they're persuasive people, as you know. And before we got through, and by the way, over the years, they've not only been persuasive, but they've been really good to me. They really helped out a lot, both financially and, you know, and support-wise, and they would find places for them. They made life a little easier. So anyway, the next thing I ended up is that in the late 70s, I ended up in Turkey. And my job there was to buy working dogs. I can remember asking them, well, okay, I'll bring dogs back and we can use them for breeding and whatever else. What does an Anatolian Shepherd look like? Oh, and there it started. Because everybody had their own idea of what one looked like, as if there was some kind of dog. But I did. I went through Turkey and I sorted among dogs. I tried to find the right colors and what else, but my primary interest was working dogs. And we did. We brought back several dozen working dogs. We had all kinds of adventures. It was a wonderful time. Sometimes a little hair-raising, but it was a wonderful time. So we brought the dogs back and we tested those dogs as throughout the United States. And then in 1996, we got asked to go back to Turkey because the Turks were having a conference on Turkish dogs, the breeds of Turkish dogs. And so I went back, and my son Tim went with me as my valet and bodyguard. And we went to Konya and we went to Sivas, and in Sivas we got kidnapped at gunpoint. We got taken away by gunpoint, and we were held up in. And so that was one of the experiences that I'll give Skip and Marilyn credit for. I've never been. I can remember my son saying to me, you know, look at, I'm not only a valet, but a bad valet, but I think I'm a bad bodyguard at the same time, which he was. So the program in the U.S., I think by the 90s, we had some 1,500 dogs working on the farms around the country. And they were divided up into three groups. There were the Italian Maremas, there was the Yugoslavian Šaplininas, and there were Anatolian Shepherds. And we had 300 or 400 of each of those breeds, if you will, that were working out on American farms. Well, word got around, and all of a sudden, other places in the world, not just Canada, not just Argentina, but all the way from Norway to South Africa, various countries wanted to have livestock guarding dogs for one reason or another. And so our program expanded to going and setting up the same kind of projects in these other countries that we had set up in the U.S. And the request, sometime in that later period, we got the request from Namibia, Laurie Marcus Cheetah Project in Namibia. And so I put together a group of students, and Louise Emanuel provided the dogs. And off we went on one of the great adventures of my life, where we went Air France with crates of dogs. And I remember one time the plane landed in Botswana, and we were going to go from Botswana over to Namibia, and I said to one of the guys, I said, you know, it's been a long time, it's been days. Those dogs have been in the hold of that airplane, and I said it would be really embarrassing to me if we got to Namibia and got the crates off and all the dogs were dead. And I'd like to see them. So here's this humongous plane. I mean, it's a huge jet. And they picked me up with a forklift on the rear end of it, and they put me into the hold of the plane, and I crawled down all through the luggage and so forth. And I can remember getting to the first dog, who looked up at me with a big tongue lick and said, "Oh, nice to see you again. Where you been?" And so we got those dogs to Namibia, and we set up a project in Namibia. And from Namibia, the dogs went, they and their offspring went back to Botswana, and then they went to South Africa. And right now, the Anatolian Shepherd dog is the dog for livestock guarding in South Africa. And of course, you realize when you're guarding sheep or goats, mainly goats, in South Africa, you're guarding them from lions, baboons, leopards, as well as something like cheetahs. And so there's some large projects going on in South Africa. For example, each of those organizations, like the cheetah organization in South Africa, specializes in Anatolian shepherds. And they have programs where you can adopt a dog. It's a fundraising activity for them as well. And they've got really, really good field people down there that are monitoring the dogs, they're watching the dogs, that are placing dogs out there and so on. And for that crazy little act of history, they all turn out to be Anatolian shepherds. All right, so we set up the Namibia project, and we set up some others, and the thing has just gone bananas all over the world. Said, here is a dog of note. So when you asked me to come down there, I, give an after dinner talk, or I don't know exactly what to tell you. I didn't know whether you wanted a travel log or whatever. So what I did was I have a friend in Montana. And she runs an enormous goat ranch. Her name is Yvonne Sweetie. And I first met her, I think, at the harness place in, I think the meeting of that year was in San Diego. And I met Yvonne Sweetie there, and she had this Anatolian, it was one of the most unusual Anatolians you ever saw. Because evidently she and her boyfriend had got in a fight, and he made some threatening move, and he hit the dog in the face, and he knocked a tooth out. And so she got upset about that it was her favorite dog, and she had a gold tooth to put in to replace the knocked tooth. So there was the dog, and I have pictures of it. I'll show you the pictures of the dog with the gold tooth. But anyway, Yvonne, because of the dog, she went out to Montana, and she started goat ranching, and right now she's one of these people with good management skills and so forth, and she manages goat racing all over the country. And she's written a book on raising and keeping goats. And in that book is a nice chapter on the livestock guarding dogs. So the other day, when I was faced with trying to think of something to say to you all, I called up, I emailed Yvonne, and I said to her, Yvonne, in 50 words or less, could you tell me something about Anatolian shepherds? Well, Yvonne never was limited to 50 words in her life, and so on. It's not something that she could actually do. So, but anyway, so I've taken what she said and brought it down to 50 words. So, Yvonne, if you're listening, excuse me. But I said, Yvonne, 50 words or less, tell me what an Anatolian shepherd is. And she wrote back and she said, committed, oh, I love this. committed with every fiber of their being and an ounce of spirit to the peace and safety of their charges. They have very low tolerance for any encroachment on the flocks or herds' space by any trespasser afoot, slithering or airborne. How do you like that? Now, you don't think snakes are a problem. As a matter of fact, they're going around the world. They're one of our major problems. Is that when you get into places like South Africa and you get boa constrictors and so on, you all of a sudden appreciate what the dog has to do. And of course, in the American West, you have all kinds of airborne predators like eagles. All right, so I said, okay, that was too long, Yvonne. Tell me, how about the Anatolian Shepherd Dog Club in 35 words? And all of a sudden, Yvonne, 35 words become, she's just passionate about you guys. People devoted to protecting, promoting the further existence and use of the Anatolian shepherd. And so she has great love for it. At the same time, she offered a criticism. She says, if it was just about human opinions and definitions, get away from the very well-meant actions. In other words, she starts talking about the behavior of the animal. And of course, as many of you know, that starting with that conference in Turkey in 1996 about Turkish breeds, there's all of a sudden this gigantic argument breaks out as to what is the real Turkish Shepherd dog. And I think what Yvonne tries to point out to you, what I've always tried to point out to you, is that an Anatolian Shepherd dog is a dog that behaves in a particular way. It doesn't matter what it looks like. I'm sorry, but I said it and I'm glad. So at the end, I said, all right, 15 words or less. Say whatever you want to about the Anatolian Shepherd. Now, 15 words, it's got to be a joke. But she says, my 24-year-old meat goat production business is in existence because of my first Anatolian Shepherd. Needed more than just guard me on my half-acre out in San Francisco. She said she moved to Montana in 1989 after the earthquake in San Francisco. And the enterprise was joined by a wonderful boyfriend. And I could see why a wonderful boyfriend would be like Yvonne. But anyway, the enterprise grew. And thanks to a series of livestock guarding dogs to Anatolian Shepherds, following Kabar, Old Gold Tooth, and so on, she gives a whole list of names of her great dogs. They never lost a meat goat to predators. And that's in north central Montana with coyotes, bears, wolves, you name it. And they now have a 250-acre homestead, and it will be paid for in 4 years. And that's more than lots of livestock people can say because their losses are so great. And so she has never experienced those losses, which has meant a financial benefit for her. And I give you her name, and she'd just sing their praises forever. But again, she's singing the praises of how the dog behaves. And I think that's my message. Is that 5 minutes? They told me I should stick to 5 minutes. All right, so I'm done.
are you up for a couple questions?
Yeah, as long as they're friendly.
Maybe I'll leave it so you can actually see the floor for a minute. Does anyone have any questions for Ray? We have time for a couple questions before dinner's going to be served. You have them in. Go ahead, now.
I do.
Mr. Coppinger, I'd like to further refine what you're talking about as far as the dog's behavior. Okay, my dogs tend to get, sometimes people will criticize or whatever, because my dogs tend to be a little sharp, they'll say. Is this the temperament you're describing, the guardian type of a temperament? To me, it's a guardian type of a temperament. I can't take my dogs to the doggy playground. And I don't think they're for the doggy playground.
They are not for the doggy playground.
Well, I just wanted to hear your opinion on that. To refine a little bit further what you're talking about when you're talking about temperament.
So are these dogs suitable to be in a dog park type environment, I think is the question.
So I can't hear you.
Okay, so the question is, could you address temperament a little bit more? And one of our breeders said that her dogs may get criticized for being a little sharp-tempered because they're guardian instincts, and she wants to know if that is in line with correct temperament, or if these dogs should be capable of going to dog parks and commingling with
show you his ears
other
from a
pets.
dog, a guardian dog.
So how many words I got? 50 words or less?
You get as many as you want.
So look at what you're doing there, and sorry to criticize, but you're treating the dog as if all dogs within the breed have some kind of instinct, and you know, and so you think of an Anatolian as a behavioral type dog, and I want to tell you it isn't. It isn't. They're like everything else. They vary, and that variation is you're finding out it's important. The other thing that I didn't hear in the question is, how do you raise a dog so that it would fit a particular environment? All right, now all dogs go through this critical period of socialization. And in that critical period of socialization, which is very young, it happens at 3 weeks or 4 weeks or and all the way up to about 8 weeks. By the time the dog gets 8 weeks old, it has developed, you know, its adult personality. And if you don't pay really particular attention to how that dog is getting along with other dogs during that first 8 weeks, you're going to find out that for the rest of its life, it's going to have some kind of characteristic. I'll give you a quick example. So I did a lot of work for guide dog organizations, and a lot of them raise their own puppies, and they'll raise 1,000 puppies a year. And the fact is that I go into their pens and I look at the dogs, and they've got in very sterile pens, very clean. Veterinarians say that the pens have got to be sterilized, otherwise the dog's going to get sick and die. And so every day, all the odors and smells that dogs make are wiped out with some kind of antiseptic. And the dogs, I'll go into a pen, and they like big litters. They like litters of 8, 10, 11, 12 puppies. And so you'll have 8, 10, 12 puppies all feeding out of the same pan. That's a big pan, and so on. But it's one pan. And what you find is that you'll have dogs guarding that pan from other dogs. And if they spend the first 8 weeks of guarding their pan from other dogs, they're going to spend the rest of their life protecting food resources. And so you take them to a park, and guess what? They see other dogs and they say, oh, there must be a resource around here somewhere. I'm going to protect the dog from a resource. All right, I'll quit. because it's a long, long discussion. I have a student, or I had a student who's now a PhD, Dr. Catherine Lord, and she hand-raised wolf puppies, German Shepherd puppies, I forget, Border Collie puppies or whatever else, and she hand-raised them and then compared their, when the onsets of their adult behaviors came on. It's very interesting stuff. You should have her down as a speaker sometime. She's good, and she looks a heck of a lot better than I do. But she's a world expert on how you raise the puppy. Now, if I have a dog and a buried, what I want written on my tombstone is he taught them to pay attention to the raising of puppies. And that's where you all miss the point. And I'm sorry to be so critical about it, but that's it. How was that? 50 words.
That was perfect. Carmen, you had a question? Go ahead. Say it so you can hear it though.
If you could charge us, the Anatolian Shepherd Dog Club of America, with a task to preserve the integrity of our breed, what would you say to us?
Okay, I couldn't hear it.
If you were to assign the Anatolian Shepherd Dog Club of America a single task for us to preserve and protect our breed, what would you tell us to do?
Read my books. Here comes the commercial. There's a book out, I think it came out this week, that I wrote with a colleague on how dogs work. And it gets at the biology of the behavior. And of course, what you people are saying is that there's a lot of biology about Anatolian Shepherds. There's stuff that's written in there. I heard in the previous question, the word instinct. You know what an instinct is? Well, if you can't define it right now, you need to buy the book tomorrow and read it and see what an instinct is and see what you're selecting for. And I think the biggest mistake that all breed clubs make is that they think the behavior of the dog is written in, and I agree that it is in some ways, but I also don't think you know what you're looking for. And so I think that the other thing I want to have written on my tombstone is that, as a matter of fact, you can define words like instinct and inherited behavior, and you can define those kinds of things, and you need to be able to do it.
Amen.
By the way, the book is not only good, it's not only good for you guys, but it makes wonderful Christmas presents.
Anyone else real fast before dinner served?
If we buy them, will you sign them for us?
I'm sure you would. The question was, if they buy the book, will you sign them for them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just for a little extra. No, I'm teasing. Of course I'd sign it.
Ray, we can't thank you enough for being with us. I'm really sad that you can't be here in person. You've actually meant a lot to me in my life. And earlier today, when I announced to the membership that you would not be here, we sent around a card signed by our members. I'll put it in the mail to you. I want to present it to you electronically now. You've been a big part of our club's history, and I just can't thank you enough. You've also been a big part of my family's history, so thank you.
And on.
Last word. I always get the last word. By the way, you guys have been a big part of my history too. And you know, the thoughts I have for you and your mother are, how can I say, warm, and Marilyn and Skip, you know, and I look around, I'm beginning to recognize faces around the audience. I can see Jacoby back there, whatever else. And I want you to know that there's lots of people in the Anatolian Club, more than just Skip and Marilyn and Louise and Katie, that were very, very supportive of these studies. And the studies, all I can say is, all those great studies, they're in the book.
Thank you.